Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today we're back on the monitor review train to look at the latest flagship monitor from Gigabyte, the FI27Q-P. This is essentially the third generation of this monitor. It all started with the surprisingly popular AD27QD, which I reviewed at the start of last year. Then it was refreshed into the FI27Q, and now we have the new -P variant of that monitor in for review today. All three of these generations are based off what began life as a 27-inch 1440p 164Hz IPS panel from Innolux, so it's falling nicely into the most popular monitor category on the market right now. The AD27QD featured those base specs, the FI27QD took the panel and overclocked it up to 165Hz, and this new -P model adds DisplayPort 1.4 into the mix. Now you might be thinking, why would Gigabyte need to make an entire monitor revision to add in DisplayPort 1.4? Wasn't that something these monitors were already providing? And that's a sensible question to ask, but surprisingly, no, the AD27QD and the FI27Q both used DP 1.2. This is fine for regular 1440p 144Hz, but wasn't sufficient for that resolution and refresh rate in conjunction with 10-bit color. To access 10-bit color on the FI27Q, you would have to have turned down the refresh rate due to DP 1.2's limited bandwidth. The upgrade to DP 1.4 solves this problem and allows all the top-end capabilities of the FI27Q at the same time. 2560 by 1440 resolution, 165Hz refresh rate, and 10-bit color for HDR, which I'll talk a little bit more about later in the review. Gigabyte was so proud of their upgrade to DP 1.4 that they now advertise this monitor as the world's first high bitrate 3 tactical monitor, high bitrate 3 being the protocol that's used with DP 1.4. It's a bit of a laughable claim because DP 1.4 isn't actually a unique feature. Plenty of other similar monitors like the LG 27G850 and Pixio PX7 Prime also include DP 1.4 ports. If anything, not having this port with the older model was a bit of an oversight on Gigabyte's part if they wanted to support 10-bit color. But anyway, that's why there's a -P and a non-P variant. In any case, you're just out shopping for this sort of display. Speaking of shopping, the FI27Q-P isn't a cheap display. It currently costs around $600, which places it in the upper tier of 1440p displays, along with the LG 27G850 and the Asus PG279Q. Many other monitors that use this panel feature more mid-range prices, like the Pixio PX7 Prime and the Asus VG27AQ is also a similar monitor, uses a slightly different panel, so Gigabyte is going to need to offer something pretty special here. The design Gigabyte has used here is very similar, if not identical, to the AD27QD we reviewed at the start of last year. While Gigabyte has gone down the more gamer aesthetic path for their displays, similar to Asus and Acer, I quite like this build, and undoubtedly it is a solid and quality construction. The stand legs are solid metal and look great. The combination of plastic used in other areas works really well, and with clean lines and tight seams, it exudes a premium build quality. There are some especially gamer elements on the rear, like the RGB LED lighting, which I find a bit pointless, although it does sync to Gigabyte's Fusion software. There's also a few vents and angles around the place, giving it that signature aggressive look that a lot of monitors go for. However, from the front, with reasonably slim bezels and a more restrained aesthetic, this design, should look good in most setups. As I would expect from a high-end monitor, there's a lot of adjustability built into the stand, including height, tilt, swivel, and pivot support. If that's not enough, you can VESA mount the display, but with such a sturdy and ergonomic stand provided, I don't think this will be necessary for many buyers. As for ports, we've already talked a bit about that, but we do get two HDMI 2.0 ports and DisplayPort 1.4 alongside a USB hub and a couple of audio jacks. There's no built-in speakers, but these audio jacks allow pass-through of audio to headphones. The on-screen display, including the directional toggle, is all the same as previous Gigabyte monitors, meaning we're still getting the same excellent set of built-in features. This includes cheek crosshairs, timers, shadow boosters, counters, and Gigabyte's unique active noise cancellation. All this stuff works quite well, and there is a backlight strobing mode that we'll talk about later. I generally don't want to spend too much time talking about OSD features because I'm skeptical of how often they're used, but it is worth mentioning that Gigabyte monitors have a great, robust feature set. Before getting into some response time testing, it's worth talking a little bit about the refresh rate features here. The FI27Q-P does top out at 165Hz, which is the higher of the two common refresh rates available with these panels, the other being 144Hz. To me, it's not a huge difference in motion handling between these two options, so generally I wouldn't bother spending any extra money to get 165Hz over 144Hz if those are your two choices. It's around a 15% increase in refresh rate, which to me is hard to distinguish, so those are just my thoughts on that if you are tossing up between this and a similar monitor that only does 144Hz like the 27GL850. The FI27Q-P does provide a decent 165Hz experience though, because we do get the full complement of adaptive sync features. So this means both FreeSync support and G-Sync compatible certification. All adaptive sync monitors work with NVIDIA cards anyway, but having this NVIDIA certified means adaptive sync works as soon as you plug it in. We also get low frame rate compensation for a smooth experience and no flickering issues. Alright, let's break down some response time numbers. Gigabyte provides 3 overdrive modes here, split into the picture quality mode, balanced, and then speed, with balanced being the default option. Unsurprisingly, picture quality is quite slow, offering around a 9 millisecond gray to gray average, effectively with overdrive disabled. I wouldn't recommend using this for gaming. Balanced is only a minor improvement at 165Hz, increasing performance to an 8.63 millisecond gray to gray average at 165Hz with no appreciable overshoot. At this sort of high refresh rate, again, this isn't a mode I'd recommend. However, things do improve substantially when switching to the speed mode. Again, at the maximum refresh rate here, we see a gray to gray average of 6.01 milliseconds, still with almost no overshoot, which is quite impressive. I know this panel can reach mid 4 milliseconds with moderate overshoot, so Gigabyte's choice to pull things back a bit to still offer good performance without overshoot, I think is quite reasonable. We also see good refresh rate compliance, with 84% of transitions falling within a reasonable tolerance of the 6.06 millisecond refresh window at 165Hz. This means we don't get much smearing, and the monitor is fast enough for 165Hz gaming. The speed mode is also great for any mid to high refresh rates. At 144Hz, performance is still strong with a sub 6 millisecond response time average, but it's at 120Hz where I was really impressed. The gray to gray average here improves to 5.26 milliseconds, still with almost no overshoot and 100% refresh rate compliance. While 165Hz is also decent, so I wouldn't necessarily advocate for reducing the refresh rate to hit this performance, there's no doubt that if you're gaming with adaptive sync up in these high refresh ranges, that you will get good to great performance. Performance isn't quite as strong at lower refresh rates. 85Hz or thereabouts seems to be the limits of the speed overdrive mode. We still get great response time averages here, but overshoot starts to become an issue. Then at 60Hz, we see overshoot errors dominate performance in a bad way, with over 40% of transitions suffering from inverse ghosting. If you are using the FI27Q-P with a 60Hz input like a console, I'd recommend dropping down one notch to balanced, where overshoot issues clear up at the expense of response times, which are average at 7.79 milliseconds. Like a lot of gaming monitors, this means there are 2 optimal overdrive modes for different refresh rate ranges. Unfortunately, there isn't just one great mode that lets you enjoy the entire adaptive sync range in peace and comfort. If you are gaming more at higher refresh rates, I'd recommend using the speed mode, while lower refresh rates around 60Hz should drop down to balanced. A bit annoying having that split, but it's not an uncommon issue for these 1440p high refresh displays. At least 60Hz is actually viable on this monitor, unlike with the Asus VG27A-Q, for example. So let's see how the Gigabyte FI27Q-P stacks up against its competition. Here we have our new chart that shows both gray to gray averages and inverse ghosting rates at the same time, because both of these metrics are intertwined and the balance between the two does dictate performance. The FI27Q sits in the middle of the pack here, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. For example, this monitor is faster than the Pixio PX7 Prime and does so with a lower error rate, which is impressive as I believe both monitors use the same Interlux panel. This suggests Gigabyte have better tuning here, or perhaps have access to better binning. Either way, it performs better in both metrics. The Asus VG27A-Q is slightly faster in terms of response times, but delivers higher inverse ghosting, and performance quickly falls away at lower refresh rates as a result. While the FI27Q can maintain good performance with its best overdrive mode down to about 80Hz, the VG27A-Q requires an overdrive adjustment at around 120Hz. For this reason, I'd have the FI27Q as the better performer than either of the two monitors I've just been talking about. Similar story compared to the VX2758Q-P MHD. Yes, the ViewSonic option can get much faster at 144Hz, but it's really only at 144Hz that we get this performance. At anything lower, we need to change the overdrive due to that high inverse ghosting rate you see here, which brings performance back to the pack. In the end, I'd say both monitors are similar, but the Gigabyte model has better tuned overdrive. Despite all of this, the FI27Q-P simply can't keep up with the LG 27GL850. LG's option is 47% quicker with comparable levels of inverse ghosting. That is to say, neither monitor has significant inverse ghosting issues. And to make matters worse for the FI27Q-P, LG's model can hold this level of performance right down to 60Hz without the need for any overdrive adjustments. So while the FI27Q is quite good compared to an average display of this type, it simply can't match LG's new Nano IPS panels. Dark level performance is in line with other IPS monitors, but here you can see why IPS is so valuable. It holds a significant performance advantage over VA panels, which often deliver dark level smearing. Refresh rate compliance is decent, above the 70 to 75% threshold we like to see for gaming displays at 84%. Again, the 27GL850 posts impressive numbers here, but compared to the VG27AQ and PX7 Prime, we actually find better performance. At this level of performance, the average error rate is very low from the FI27Q, significantly outperforming monitors like the VX2758Q-P MHD, the VG27AQ, and even the PX7 Prime. This fits with what we saw earlier with inverse ghosting rates essentially being zero. While most of the adaptive sync range has great performance, unfortunately the FI27Q does need to be slowed down at 60Hz to prevent inverse ghosting issues. As such, it falls down the charts here, but so do other displays like the VG27AQ. The 27GL850, as I mentioned just before, is a clear winner here for 60Hz gaming. What about input lag? No issues here whatsoever, and with a combination of low input lag and decent enough response times, we see total input lag in the chain falling below 10 milliseconds. As a reminder, this chart shows a combination of three factors that all impact input latency: the amount of time it takes for the monitor to process the image, how often it refreshes to show you a new image, and how quickly it can transition to show that image. Anything below 10 milliseconds combined is very good. Power consumption is a little higher than competing monitors. General monitor power consumption is quite low as a standalone component, so I'm sure most people aren't that concerned, but the FI27Q-P does suck down around 13% more power than the 27GL850 and 26% more than the Pixio PX7 with normalized brightness. Gigabyte also includes a backlight strobing mode called Aim Stabilizer. Bit of a strange name, but that's what they've gone with. And like most non-ASUS monitors, it can't be used simultaneously with adaptive sync. The implementation here is a bit lackluster in my opinion. While it does work, there is low to moderate strobe crosstalk, so you do see a faintish trail of duplicate images following around moving objects. The bigger issue for me is that brightness is completely disabled in this mode, so you're stuck with around 200 nits exactly. If you want to use any other brightness level, you're out of luck. I think a bit more work would really elevate this mode to being very decent. Let's pivot now to looking at color performance. The Gigabyte FI27Q-P is a wide gamut IPS panel, packing about 93% DCI-P3 coverage in my testing, which is good for casual wide gamut usage. But as we normally see from wide gamut panels, the gamut is left unclamped, which does affect sRGB performance. There are a few other issues here too. Out of the box, Gigabyte has calibrated this monitor to use a 7500K white point or thereabouts, which does create a cold tone with a blue tint. This doesn't seem to be a one-off. It's the same situation with the Gigabyte CV27Q, so this could be an error in the way Gigabyte are calibrating these displays. This does affect grayscale accuracy, as you can see with a mediocre 4.01 delta E average. The other problem, as I said, is the lack of an sRGB clamp in the SDR mode by default. This causes moderate oversaturation, leading to a delta E average in both our saturation and color checker tests above 3.0. It's not terrible, and some people may prefer this vibrant look, but it's not accurate. Gigabyte does provide an sRGB mode which can clamp down the gamut, but unfortunately it's not very good and exhibited a strong red tint on my review unit which can't be fixed using OSD controls. So to really nail down sRGB performance, we have to perform a full calibration. But for those that don't have the tools, I was able to bring the white point much closer to an accurate position using these settings. So let's check out how that performs. We do see a significant improvement to grayscale accuracy, now with the sub 1.0 Delta E average, which is fantastic. Color performance does improve as well. It's not quite where I want it to be, but it's better, so there's that. After a full calibration using display cal, it's no surprise to see excellent sRGB performance. With 100% coverage of this gamut, we can achieve fantastic results, which really makes this panel suitable for all sorts of work with sRGB content. As for calibrated D65P3 performance, pretty good here as well, although there are some larger errors at the top end of saturation as the panel can't quite hit 100% P3 coverage. General results with this gamut are very good after calibration though, and if you want to play around with the ICC profile we created, that's available for our Patreon members, although as always, due to panel variances, your mileage will vary. The FI27Q-P is a bright panel, achieving over 450 nits when calibrated, well above the 350 nits that Gigabyte claim on their spec sheet. Given brightness improved after calibration, I'm not sure whether Gigabyte are just being conservative here, but I think most buyers will see above 400 nits here easily. Contrast is acceptable without being amazing at around 1100 to 1, which is similar to most other IPS monitors with these specs, but notably lower than VA panels. The one outlier here is the LG 27GL850, which packs a 32% lower contrast ratio and isn't great in low light viewing environments. This is the one main downside to LG's display. It's not a huge deal in most conditions, but those that like to game in the dark but still want an IPS panel may want to opt for a different screen like the FI27Q. Viewing angles are excellent here, as I'd hope from an IPS, and I didn't experience any significant IPS glow issues, although that can vary from unit to unit, so it's always hard to comment on. Uniformity is very good as well, which when paired with those viewing angles and decent calibrated performance makes this a very suitable monitor for a bit of content creation work alongside gaming. I do have to talk about HDR here as well, because Gigabyte lists this as an HDR capable display with Display HDR 400 certification. However, as is the case with most gaming monitors outside the very expensive $1,000 plus units, there's no meaningful HDR experience to be had here because this monitor lacks local dimming. This means the high contrast ratios that are the cornerstone of HDR simply aren't achievable. I mean, it's in the name, high dynamic range, and you can't get that on an LCD panel without local dimming. I wouldn't buy this display for HDR, and there are really no other competing monitors that offer HDR either, so for me it's not really a big deal. Alrighty then, that's the usual suite of monitor tests out of the way, lots of charts and Delta E discussions. I know all of you love that sort of thing, so here's my overall thoughts on the Gigabyte Aorus FI27Q-P, the successor and current generation equivalent to the AD27QD. In terms of hardware, features and performance, I think this is a good monitor. Response time performance is better than I expected from this panel and generally decent. It's not perfect, it gets beaten by LG's 27GL850, and the speed overdrive mode isn't quite good enough to cover the entire adaptive sync range, but if you're really making use of this panel's 165Hz refresh rate, you're going to be getting a good 5 to 6 millisecond experience with no overshoot concerns. This is backed up by excellent input lag, a great adaptive sync implementation, and even G-Sync compatible certification. It also offers the higher of the two common refresh rates for these 1440p monitors at 165Hz, and while I don't think this is an essential upgrade over 144Hz, it's a nice bonus, so can't complain. We're getting a good color experience, but it does take a bit of work to get it there, as I did experience a few issues out of the box, mostly with color temperature. It's a wide gamut display with strong brightness, acceptable contrast, outstanding viewing angles, and great uniformity. If you calibrate it, this monitor can easily be used for a bit of content creation alongside gaming if that's what you want. If not, you'll still get a superb viewing experience, which is one of the key reasons to go IPS. Gigabyte combines this with a strong feature set, including active noise cancellation and a flawed but usable backlight strobing mode. The build quality is similar to the AD27QD, meaning it's very good and befitting of a high-end display. And yes, we finally get DisplayPort 1.4, as Gigabyte loves to advertise on their website. Everything here points to the FI27Q-P delivering a good mid-range 1440p high refresh experience. It doesn't have the top-end performance you get from an LG 27GL850 or the best factory calibration, but it's a good display with a robust feature set, and I think buyers of it will be quite happy. But it's disappointing that Gigabyte have once again priced this monitor too high. I find the $600 price tag really hard to justify when they're superior in most areas LG 27G850 is priced at just $500. This is real high-end territory here, and Gigabyte just hasn't delivered enough performance in my opinion to warrant such a high price tag. In fact, I think I've made this exact same complaint with pretty much every Gigabyte monitor I've reviewed. They're all just a little bit overpriced. Given its performance, a price tag around $400 to $450 would be more suitable, bringing it down around the mark of the Asus VG27AQ and Pixio PX7 Prime. The FI27Q-P performs a little bit better than those displays. In some areas it has better features and in others it falls behind, but I think that sort of price tag would make it very competitive. As it stands, if you have $600 to spend, you're much better off grabbing the 27G850 and pocketing $100 for other PC upgrades. The good news for buyers is we did see prices for the AD27QD fall over time, so hopefully that happens again with the FI27Q-P, and it also appears that the non-P model is available for around $500 US. That's still not an ideal price for this monitor. I'd still want it more around that $400 to $450 price, but if you really don't need DisplayPort 1.4, if you're not planning on using it in the 10-bit color mode, then the FI27Q model might be something to look at. It's not a bad monitor, this model, the P model, but it's just fallen a bit foul of Gigabyte's high launch pricing, which hopefully for maybe a future generation they'll reconsider. That's it for this review. As always, you can subscribe for more Hardware Unboxed monitor testing. Big shout out to our Patreon members who do make all of this possible, who support us through there. If you're interested in signing up and getting access to things like our Discord community, monthly live streams, monitor profiles, behind the scenes videos, all that sort of thing, links to that are in the description below. Like the video if you enjoyed it. We also have merch available, hoodies, mugs, all that sort of thing. Also links in the description below, and I'll catch you in the next one.